Welcome to Loup TV. I'm Gene along with Doug for Monday, February 14th. We have one topic today. It is Super Bowl ads and the impact on tech. And as a reminder, I am old. I am over 50 now, 50.6 years old. Doug is young. And I remember 2000 when we were seeing almost every Super Bowl ad was .com. And thinking back, I remember pets.com was one of the big ones. They advertised several times here, but the reason why that history makes sense here is that Super Bowl ads are a good way to kind of look into how money is being spent and what potential trends can impact our lives. And there were two big segments that really stood out. One is around EVs. There were 6 EV ads plus a wall charger ads, and second around crypto and NFTs, and there was 4 of those. And so, Doug, bring you in here to talk a little bit about the EV piece. When you kind of put together outside of the creative, what stood out, not getting into the creative, what stood out for you, but just from the broader impact on EVs and what should we take away from those 6 ads?
Probably something a lot of people won't agree with, but that there are alternatives to Tesla coming. I feel like, sometimes we get into this sort of debate around where is traditional auto. No one, I think that's sane would say that they've been on the ball with this. They've been behind. But I think you see, obviously, BMW has a car in market. If you think about who advertised the Chevy Silverado coming next year, they're still behind, obviously. But I think the bottom line is, there are some real EVs that are coming to market that Tesla will have competition where they just haven't had any competition sort of to date.
So if you look at the 5 that did advertise, 4 of the 5, as you said, have cars in the market. One, you talked about the Silverado is taking pre-orders. And there was from my perspective, I agree everything that you're saying, and that the word that really jumped out to me is there are other EVs that are coming, and that is true. We're going to see more competition. We've been waiting for competition for a long time, and maybe it's not worth looking in the rearview mirror about why it's taken so long, but kind of going forward, when you think about what Ford's commentary was, 40% or greater percentage of their vehicles will be EVs by 2030. GM last night said they will have 30 models or 30 or more models by 2030. They have many models. We don't know how many they have, but from my perspective, yes, competition's coming, but it still feels like it's just doesn't have the same availability, the same urgency, I think, that is needed to really get into this market. Would you agree that traditional auto has the right urgency right now, as evidenced by 5 Super Bowl ads? Or do you think that, yes, they're moving, but they're not moving fast enough?
There's probably a third answer, which is I don't know if they're capable of moving faster. I mean, they're investing. Ford has talked about investing $50 billion over the next several years to get plants ready to ramp production. And so I think there's a physical limitation, right, in terms of how fast can you move. They've certainly been behind the ball. But to me, it's just simple. I mean, we get in these debates of like what's going to happen between now and 2030, let's just say. Tesla's going to sell a lot more cars. I don't doubt that at all. I also don't doubt that traditional auto is going to be selling EVs that are in competition to Tesla. And so the bottom line for me is what's most probable is Tesla's going to be a very large auto OEM. The traditional OEMs are going to still be around. I don't think any of them are going to go bankrupt. Maybe 1 or 2 of them probably will because that's the way of the world. But I don't think you're going to see a wave of bankruptcies from these traditionals. And I think they are going to have competitive products in the market that are viable alternatives.
And when we've talked about kind of maybe the nature of the auto industry, about your identity as being associated with your vehicle, and just by nature, people have different identities, and is this a market that ultimately is just going to have a lot of different brands? It's always going to be fractionalized, and it's going to be hard for any one company really to take more share. I mean, keep in mind, I think the largest automotive maker, is it Volkswagen? They have 15% share, something like that. I mean, compare that to largest phone maker in the US is 52% share. So is this is the real takeaway here? Eventually, EVs are going to come, but it's always going to be fragmented because our identities are always going to be wrapped up in cars. Or conversely, is how we've thought about our identity is going to shift away from your car and your ownership of physical things and more of a digital identity, and people won't care as much about what brand their car is, and they'll be more interested in the price value of their vehicle, and more interested in spending their money elsewhere.
I mean, I think that is a far more interesting question than debating, Ford's 40% target and moving fast enough. I think all that stuff gets very abstract and esoteric very quickly and isn't really useful to the conversation. What you asked to me is the probably most important question that you can create some view on, which is, what is your opinion of human nature, is really what the question is. And historically, the last 100 years where we've had automobile ownership on a broad level, that has been one of the most important components of a person's identity. Right. It's the most expensive thing that most people own aside from their house. And so people wanted to say something about them.
Mm-hmm. Even, by the way, even people who don't spend on their cars. I remember hearing that David Letterman drove a station wagon. Don't know if that's true or not, but it just says a lot about who you are. It has historically said a lot about who you are.
Right. And owning a Tesla says something about who you are, but so does owning a Ford, and so does owning, a Hummer when that's out, and, so will owning a Rivian, right? And so I think that sometimes what gets missed in this conversation, in my opinion, is that there's this belief that somehow Tesla is going to have this Apple-like effect where everybody's just going to have the Tesla because it's assumed that that's going to be the best vehicle, just like Apple makes the best phone. I think the flaw in that analogy, in my opinion, though, is the phone is a tool. The phone is not a tool for identity. It's a tool for communication. And I think the iPhone was useful for identity when very few people had one. So in 2007, 2008, 2009, it was a very strong component of identity, because when you had an iPhone, other people had a BlackBerry, that made you very different. But today, when pretty much everybody has an iPhone, now it's you don't think about it as, okay, I have this thing that says something about me in my hand. It's, I've got this thing that performs a function for me. And it's harder for me to believe that, a $40,000, $48,000, whatever our ASPs are now, car that you're going to be making monthly payments on probably still in the future is something that we would not put more weight in terms of the importance of it representing our identities.
So we've talked about a future where our identities are going to be mostly digital. We'll be spending more in crafting that around NFTs, for example, and think about the metaverse and how that all plays into it. And would your view be that because we're still going to be spending a lot of money on cars 15 years from now, that that we'll still want to project our identity on in the physical world related to your car purchase?
Absolutely. And I would like to offer a correction on one thing. I wouldn't say our identities are going to be mostly digital. They're going to be very much more digital than they are today. And I think there's a distinction between most and more.
For sure.
Our offline identities are still going to be very important. So think about the things that people spend money on for offline identity, things like sneakers, handbags, watches, all of those things I think are going to be just as important, if not more important, to separate ourselves in the physical world as NFTs and things like that separate us in the digital world. And so to me, yes, I think cars will remain a very big part of our identity, maybe even more than they are today. I don't think they'll be less.
Got it. And just to kind of finish the thought out related to market share, I agree with that. I think Tesla's going to be the company that's going to benefit the most around EVs. And I'm not talking about market cap. I'm just talking about number of vehicles. I generally have seen it as kind of a 20% market share, which I do not think that any car company is going to take 50% share. I'll give you a final word on this before we move to the crypto NFT Super Bowl ad topic.
Nothing more to add. Let's talk the identity piece more.
All right. So there are 4 ads related to crypto and NFTs. One that stuck out to me, I didn't know what it was. I was scrambling to get my phone to do the QR code. I was thrilled because we are investors in Coinbase to see Coinbase is changing QR code. I was also happy that even though they spent probably $13 million, maybe it was a minute ad or they did it twice, I forget. They didn't probably spend a ton on the production. I'm sure an ad agency still made some very good money on producing that ad, but I think the production costs were relatively low. But your thought more broadly, that was the Coinbase piece. Maybe we'll just start there. What did you think of the Coinbase ad?
I thought it was creative. People criticized them because the site went down because they had a wave of traffic that came in from the ad. I view that more as a positive than a negative, and
For sure it is. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
try to
definitely a
set
positive.
the bias aside. I don't think that's a failure at all. People are still talking about the ad today. If you browse on Twitter, people are talking more about that ad than any of the other crypto ads that were out there. So I think it's a W for them.
Nice. And I guess what does it mean that these four companies are willing to put a lot of money into this? Is there a way to kind of think, it feels like the inflection point when you think about EVs is mainstream inflection. I don't know what's closer. Is it crypto or EVs?
I think crypto is way closer to mainstream inflection. I mean, think about the percentage of cars that are EVs today, versus the number of people that own crypto. I think the number of people who own an EV is probably low single digits
Mm-hmm.
across the US in terms of population. And I've seen some data on the crypto side where I believe that crypto ownership is in somewhere in the, double digits, below 50%, but it's somewhere in the double digits. So, I mean, I think crypto is far and away running away with the mainstream adoption question. And that's to me the most important takeaway from these ads, because I think the skeptical view of these ads is they are the next ePets or pets.com or eToys, the blow ups from 20
Mm-hmm.
years ago. I think there's something that's very, very different from those companies, though, which is these companies, Coinbase in particular, has already proven that it can operate a profitable business today. They already generate profits. Those .com companies never even got close to profitability.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, what we just talked about is there's already this mass adoption. Like, again, we're in the, you think about an S curve in terms of how people adopt things. We're getting toward, probably that beginning of the real meat in terms of the adoption in an S curve for crypto. We can question whether it takes off or not. And that's a fair question. But when we were talking about pets.com, and we were all the way at the very, very beginning, like people had barely even used e-commerce and they were out pushing this thing. Crypto is real today. It's profitable today. And a lot of people are already doing it today. So I think that's something that really stands out in terms of being different from these old, tech blowups.
I think Coinbase has this, the ideal balance between being in front of a massive curve to sleeping well at night, knowing that they make money. And I love investing in those types. You don't get them very often. And we think this has the potential to be one of those generational companies that 10 years from now that just become household names. And not there yet. It's not investment advice. It's just our internal view. And leaving that and on behalf of what was an exciting game and some exciting Super Bowl ads on behalf of Doug, Gene, and Loup TV. Bye for now.